सभासदों, माननीय उपसभापति जी,
we have a we had a strategy, so tomorrow you will see what we do. It is still a closely guarded secret. अरुण जी, आप अभी बोलेंगे? ठीक है.
Madam Deputy Chairman, this bill that we have been discussing arises under very peculiar circumstances. And there are two facets of this entire debate which I wish to emphasize upon. The first, of course, is a matter which has been a concern in this House as also in the entire polity and other institutions of this country, how to really exonerate Indian politics from the influence of any form of criminalization. It's a legitimate concern, and to some measure the bill seeks to address that problem. I shall deal with it a little later. But the other aspect is in relation to the circumstances under which this bill really has been introduced. And that aspect relates to the authority and jurisdiction of Indian Parliament to legislate. I say this with a sense of deep concern that over the last few years, gradually, what we had envisaged as one of the basic facets of our constitution, the separation of powers, where the legislative jurisdiction vests exclusively in Parliament, has been increasingly getting obliterated and getting substituted by what is known as judicial legislation. Through a process of judicial legislation, an encroachment has been increasingly made in the Parliament's jurisdiction to legislate. And perhaps one glaring example where such a situation has arisen is in relation to the circumstances under which this bill really has been enacted. Madam, the Constitution of India under Article 327 very clearly provides that in relation to elections and conduct of elections, it shall be the Parliament of India, that is both houses of this Parliament, which shall legislate in relation to all laws in relation to the conduct of elections. Pursuant to that, we have enacted the Representations of People Act 1950 and 1951. In the 1951 Act, in section 36, we have clearly provided what are going to be the conditions of a valid nomination paper. Those conditions for a valid nomination which deal with scrutiny of nominations and when the nominations can be rejected are mentioned in the legislation which this august House along with the other House has framed and which has stood the test of time. If there is a need to add upon further conditions of a valid nomination paper, it is this Parliament, it is this House and the other House alone and no other institution, however constitutional or august those institutions would be, who really have a jurisdiction to interfere in that process of enactment. Unfortunately, we faced a judgment of the Delhi High Court, which amongst other factors mentioned that there would be a requirement that every candidate to an election would be required to file an affidavit, and along with that affidavit, the candidate would be expected to give details of several facts in relation to the candidate. I must submit that the Election Commission of India at this stage had opposed this direction which was made by the Delhi High Court. They contested this direction, they did not agree with this direction. The details which were asked for were in relation to offences which a candidate is accused of, assets possessed by a candidate or his spouse. The third is most important: facts giving insight into the candidate's competence, capacity and suitability for acting as a parliamentarian. Now this matter, which is to be decided by the ultimate sovereign, which is the people of India, somehow got substituted, and therefore to the returning officer you have to explain why you consider yourself competent to become a parliamentarian or a legislator. And the fourth is information which the Election Commission considers necessary for judging the capacity and the capability of a political party fielding the candidate to an election to Parliament or the state legislature. Now it is the Election Commission whose only jurisdiction is to make sure that there is a conduct of free and fair election, will now become some kind of a ombudsman or a monitor and start determining what kind of capacity and capability a political party has. It's a matter which is to be judged in a democracy by the people of India, not by the Election Commission or its members, and this direction was issued. Election Commission at this stage was still opposed to these directions. In fact, when the Government of India questioned this direction before the Supreme Court, the Election Commission, even at that stage, had been opposed to some of these directives which had been issued. I was just now perusing the affidavit which the Election Commission had filed. The Election Commission, in fact, had gone to the extent of saying that some of these directions would result in a situation which would be destructive of the very democratic institution itself. We then had a change of personnel as far as the Election Commission was concerned. The stand was changed. And finally, the Supreme Court, in this judgment, has given a direction in which the Supreme Court says that there are 5 details which a candidate now has to present. Now, what is extremely interesting when I speak in terms of encroachment of jurisdiction of Parliament, the Supreme Court laid down guidelines that now it is necessary, in addition to what is stated in section 36, that is conditions of a valid nomination paper, there are judicial directions in addition to what Parliament decides as to what a candidate must disclose. I can understand some of those directions may be very well-meaning, but then it is for this Parliament to decide that those well-meaning suggestions have to be incorporated in the law. The jurisdiction which is vested in Parliament through this process cannot be taken away by the Supreme Court under any jurisdiction, because the legislative jurisdiction vests alone in Parliament. And the directions were, and I deal with each of the 5 directions, whether the candidate is convicted, acquitted, discharged of any criminal offence in the past. If any, whether he is punished with imprisonment or fine. So whether you have been convicted, whether you have been discharged, whether you are a trade union activist, whether you are a political activist, you quoted arrest under section 144, you must have all those details, and if you forget to mention any of those details, the consequences will then arise. Convicted or acquitted or discharged. Now, during the process before this ordinance came into effect, 2 or 3 by-elections were held after this judgment, and for those 2 or 3 by-elections, this judgment was in force. Out of my own curiosity and education, I tried to bring about and see what candidates to those by-elections really had to say about these details. Mr. Narayan Dutt Tiwari contested the by-election in Uttaranchal. So in his nomination paper, which I had an occasion, which was shown in some other institution, he says, I remember that I was jailed in 1942. The section, the court, the dates, the acquittal, the discharge, the judgment are all not with me. Now this would be true in almost relation to people in different political activity, to give details of every case where you have been discharged, and there is no distinction as to which case you have been convicted, in which case you have been discharged, whether it is a case of a political agitation. Madam, I do recollect, if I speak from a personal experience, I had 7 prosecutions against me during the emergency. If I am asked to fill up a nomination in consonance with this judgment, I am sure the nomination would be liable to be rejected. I don't remember the details of a single one of them. The second was, prior to 6 months, if there is any case pending, that's related to the first one, assets of a candidate and his or her spouse and that of dependents. Now the candidate having to give his assets, I can understand that if you want probity in public life, that people who get elected must disclose their assets, ministers disclose their assets to the Prime Minister. There are several legislators which have made a rule that there must be declaration of assets after you have been elected. So after getting elected, if there is an increment in the assets itself, the people are entitled to know. But in this case, before you get elected, merely because you file a nomination, you must make your assets public. And even though the present law has a provision for a subsequent declaration of assets, we must always bear in mind that when assets are declared, the experience has been that those with declared assets declare their assets. Those with undeclared assets don't declare their assets. So the honest man's assets always become public, and the person who falls in the other category, his assets always remain a secret because they are the non-declared assets. But this has been one of the demands which has been raised for the last few decades. Therefore, this issue has continued. Liabilities, if any, particularly whether there are dues of any public financial institution or government dues. Now there could be a dispute, there could be a telephone bill pending, there could be an electricity bill pending, there could be some appeals of the income tax which are pending. How are each one of them relevant to his right to contest election and the voters' right to elect him? What are the consequences of this? And I'll show subsequently what the Election Commission did, because when they realized that the Parliament's jurisdiction was being taken over by the Supreme Court, the Election Commission decided that let me chip a little more of it and take some of it myself. Because the Election Commission also indulged in a parallel legislation. And the effect of this was that if I were to file my nomination and say, well, a bank has a claim of 50 lakhs against me, my opponent could well file an objection and say, well, with interest, this is not 50 lakhs, this is 80 lakhs. And a returning officer within 1 day available to him would become the adjudicatory authority of my educational qualifications, my assets, my bank claims against me, my dues and bills which are pending. And once the nomination is rejected, even if it's wrongfully rejected, then the remedy under Article 329 would only be to file an election petition. Let us recollect that in a recent election held in one of our neighboring countries, a provision of this kind was introduced, which newspapers have said and responsible international magazines have said, which was used to subvert democracy in that country. A qualification requirement was put in. And under that qualification requirement, one leading politician, also a former cricketer, found his nomination on the same qualification rejected by one returning officer, accepted by another. People were expected to be candidates. People who were expected to be graduates brought certificates from madrasas. So the returning officer rejected some certificates and accepted some certificates. And there has been a great debate in that country that that law of having graduates only can contest was actually one of the principal weapons used to subvert democracy or subvert the process of elections in that country. And lastly, of course, was in relation to Election Commission, the educational qualifications. Now, not being satisfied with this direction, what is very curious is the Election Commission, after the change of personnel, asked the Supreme Court, make these 5 directions and give us the power to our returning officers to decide whether correct details are given or incorrect details are given. So if incorrect details are given, we should have the power to reject the nomination papers. They filed an affidavit seeking that power. The Supreme Court did not give them this power. Why I say this relates to Parliament's jurisdiction, that even when Supreme Court did not give them this power, the Election Commission, but for this ordinance, decided to give that power to itself. And pursuant to Article 324, the Election Commission passed a directive on 28th of June 2002. And in that direction they said, every candidate must file his nomination paper. Non-furnishing of the affidavit shall be considered to be a violation of this order. And lastly, furnishing of any wrong or incomplete information or suppression of any material information by a candidate or from the said affidavit may also result in rejection of the nomination paper. So if this ordinance had not been brought, and if this ordinance doesn't become an act, which has the effect of nullifying some parts of the judgment and this order of the Election Commission, the situation will retrieve, that the judgment revives, the order of the Election Commission revives, as a result of which returning officers, ADMs, SDMs, collectors who are returning officers, in that 14-day period when the nominations are to be filed, and in that 1 or 2-day period for scrutiny of nominations, will first become ombudsmen of assets of candidates, whether somebody has correctly declared his jewelry or not correctly declared his wife's jewelry, become ombudsmen of whether bank loans and electricity dues have been correctly declared or not, and whether educational qualifications have been correctly mentioned or not. In fact, the other by-election which was held was under which Dr. P.C. Alexander got elected to the Rajya Sabha. So when his nomination was shown, I checked, I also had a chance to see it. One was Mr. Narendra Tiwari's, one was Dr. P.C. Alexander's when the judgment was enforced. So Mr. Narendra Tiwari never remembered which judge had convicted him in 1942, how many days he spent, what was the section under which he was convicted. So a convenient, pliable returning officer could legitimately have rejected the nomination. Dr. Alexander knew his entire qualifications he mentioned. But in that thick affidavit which he was required to file, His school and college passing out details, his post-graduation and PhD were all mentioned, but even a person as eminent as him had not filled up some of those details. So any returning officer could rise up and say, well, this is not required to be filed. And this has not been correctly filed, and therefore the nomination can be rejected on this ground. Madam, I raise this question for the reason. The issue of probity in public life has to be independently considered. The first issue which this House must be concerned with is, the effect of this law is to substantially set aside the effect of the judgment and the effect of the order of the Election Commission. Besides being impractical in many manners, both the judgment and the order of the Election Commission have taken away the legislative jurisdiction of Parliament and decided that now part of the legislative jurisdiction goes to Supreme Court by this judicial legislation power, and part of the legislative jurisdiction gets further added on to the authority of the Election Commission by saying, well, now I will have the power to decide all this. What in effect takes place? Section 36 of the Representation of People's Act may give 4 or 5 reasons when a nomination can be rejected. Read jointly the effect of the Supreme Court judgment and the Election Commission order. They have added 5 more reasons why a nomination can be rejected. And some of those reasons give absolutely arbitrary power, which, as I have said on basis of the instances and experience of one of our neighboring countries, could be effectively used in a given situation to subvert the very institution of elections. We have seen that happening in the other country, our neighboring country, and this is something which we must be very careful of. And one of the first reasons I believe that this legislation must be passed is that this encroachment of parliamentary jurisdiction by any other authority, howsoever high they may be, has to come to an end. This cannot be permitted to continue. If it does continue, it brings about an imbalance in the entire functioning of our democracy, where separation of powers between the legislature and the judiciary is a part of our basic structure as an inherent component of our democracy. Secondly, madam, as far as the main issue is concerned, the concern really has been on issues of criminals entering public life. How do we stop that? That's an issue which Parliament has to now consider how to address. We've had several all-party meetings. There have been suggestions of the Law Commission, there have been suggestions of the Election Commission that the framing of the charge should be considered as sufficient to prevent a person from contesting elections. And whenever all-party meetings have been held, except for one party from the state of Sikkim, almost every national party was opposed to this suggestion, not because they wanted to encourage criminals to enter politics. Because one reality every political party was aware of, law and order is a state subject. The power to prosecute is best with the local police. It's a power with every sub-inspector of this country. And once you record 2 statements and file a prosecution, then a situation may well come. The moment a charge is framed, a charge could be framed for gherowing the management in a trade union movement, a charge could be framed for being in agitational politics, a charge could be framed for being in illegitimate criminal activity also. Now, under all these circumstances, who will make this distinction? So the political parties felt that the final arbiter of this really has to be the people of India. And therefore, if it has to be the people of India, they must know who they are electing, who they are not electing. You need people education. You don't need to create bars and give jurisdictions, because if you give the power to stop a person from contesting an elections, then let me give a realistic example. Let us take a situation when our first elections were held, almost every leader of our freedom movement had criminal cases against them. Let us look back at the 1977 election. There was hardly a member of Mr. Morarji Desai's cabinet who didn't have some form of prosecution against him or the other filed during the emergency. All you had to do was to file prosecutions of this kind, get the charges framed, and then say, well, the bar on you comes. And therefore, the present legislation which has been brought about by the Department of Law is well considered. It balances the situation. It gives the people the right to know what are the serious criminal cases against a person on basis of his affidavit. And thereafter, after he gets elected, it gives the people the right to know what his assets are. There is some nexus between his assets, increase in assets, with any possible misuse of authority. The nexus should not be for what he has possessed before he ever became a candidate. The nexus has to be that once in office, you have not misused your office to collect further or increase your further assets, and therefore the legislation in this regard is a balanced piece of legislation which has been brought. And I would urge this Honorable House to consider this fact, and therefore also the fact that this House has to assert its jurisdiction and authority to legislate, which is being gradually taken away. It is with these words, Madam, that I support this bill which has been brought about by the Ministry of Law. Thank you.
Nilotpal Basu.
Madam Deputy Chairperson, I have heard very carefully to my very dear Minister of State for Law, who was little bit, in my opinion, exuberant in his defense of the bill, Bharadwaj ji and Jaitley ji. The point that I would like to make at the very outset, that people have gone into the detailed background of how this bill evolved. But the presumptions on which we support this bill is completely different. And the presumptions with which some of us are passing this bill, also we do not agree. Now, as have been stated by a number of speakers, that the High Court order, subsequent EC order, created this problem, whereby all of us, we agreed that this is a clear-cut encroachment in the powers of the legislature. Therefore, it cannot be accepted. But the underlying presumption that right to information being a fundamental right, though it is not, I mean, as yet, but this presumption, and that as if information on the criminality or the suitability or the money power that a particular candidate may be having, the mere information to the citizenry and the elector is in itself an overriding safeguard for cleansing the political and the electoral process of the influence of cash and muscle power. That presumption is very wrong. In the all-party meeting, Madam, which we attended along with many other colleagues in the House, our leader in the other House, he was pointing out that he has been a member of Parliament for the last 30 years almost. And he is an active parliamentarian. He tries to visit his constituency. He has not been able to visit all the villages in his constituency. So even if the affidavit is filed by the candidate, chances are very little, very few, that information will eventually go to the elector. And I don't think that the fact of the matter is like that, that electors or people are electing legislators who are history cheaters, who are having a criminal background, because they do not know of them. In spite of the full knowledge about the background of a candidate, people are getting elected. So I think something more fundamental is involved in the process of cleansing our polity, cleansing our electoral process of criminality and the influence of money power. In fact, Madam, if you see that today the same kind of law operates in the whole of the country, but in certain states, you are finding that less and less allegations about the kind of legislators they are electing. And about some states, there are more and more allegations coming out about having criminal background. Bharadwaj ji correctly referred to the NGO document which was sent to all of us. Now I am sure if an election in West Bengal is held today, I mean, any NGO will also find difficult to list so many names about the kind of candidates they were fighting for elections. And I think the presumptions are also very wrong, because the focus has to be on the present. Now, the past background, as has been rightly pointed out by many speakers, I agree, is not the main issue. As responsible elected representatives of the people, what we are doing. As legislators, those of us who are not in the executive, whether we are misusing our powers, because we are not supposed to have executive powers. The incremental changes in our assets and whether probity will be there. But unfortunately, well, the government was quite prompt in addressing itself to the situation arising out of the order of the court and the election commission. Their alacrity or their proactivity was not equally displayed in terms of addressing those fundamental questions. Madam, I would like to refer the fact that CVC bill, which has been on the basis of which the report has been submitted by the standing committee, why it is not come? Lokpal bill, I think years together the report has been submitted, why nothing has been done? Voda committee report was there, whether the present government has done something to follow it up. I find Dinesh Bhai Trivedi smiling quietly at me. He was one of the members amongst many of us earlier when he was on this side. That some follow-up has to be done. Why Indrajit Gupta committee recommendations are still at large? And the whole question, I find very unfortunate. Ravi Shankar Prasad ji, while piloting the bill, mentioned many things. That corporate funding also. Now, as such, we see in this today's process so much of corporate influence. Why should we have corporate funding? It is this government which says that business is business. Government should have nothing to do with it. So when the funding of institutions is the responsibility of the state, why should it be left to the business? And how all candidates, irrespective of their political affiliations, will get same kind of support? Why the tax break government is advocating for corporate funding of elections? These are serious questions. Now we don't believe that without state funding you can have a really clean process of elections. Questions are being raised about why Rajya Sabha voting should not be open. I know we may be very isolated in this, but you see problems of internal functioning of a political party. It is our failure. Those parties who cannot keep their flock together in the assembly and their members get bought up, that is their problem. We have to reflect on that. If the political process has come to such a pass.
And who sponsors criminals also? The parties sponsor criminals.
Now, the difficulty with Gautam ji and others on that side is they take a holier than thou attitude. Now the problem is that if my ideology, my program is not strong enough as to inspire loyalty from not only my ordinary members, but elected members whom I have given ticket, the responsibility of that you put on the house that, okay, one of the basic features of parliamentary democracy, secret ballot, would have to go. What about parties, lock, stock and barrel, switching over their positions? Certain parties say, we won't go, if you elect us, we won't go with any other party. But after the elections, they suitably change. Gautam ji's party has done this in UP. And Mayawati's party has done it in UP. So what about that? Can you, with such laws, really bring an end to opportunism in politics today? So the issue is much more fundamental. Certain fundamental issues will have to be addressed by the collective polity. I agree. Today our credibility is at stake. And unless each of us, each of the political parties in their own way do not go for this kind of introspection, we cannot stop the process of becoming irrelevant in this country vis-a-vis our people. The fact that our people, we do not command that kind of respect that our earlier generation who were thrown up by the freedom struggle did is something to ponder over. So, madam, we maintain this position that this background, etc., are wholly unnecessary. But still, I mean, since there is a consensus, we go with that consensus. And assets, I would like to mention, actually we are also ineffective in placing our position. This asset, the provision that we are now having in this bill, what I have seen in the report of the ethics committee of our own house is already there. It is another matter that we have not been collectively able to implement the recommendations of our own house committee. But the provision that we are today adding of after having been elected within 90 days, that provision, that recommendation is already contained in the report of the ethics committee. And you see that educational qualification, it's such an elitist concept. Still today, opportunities and access to education is basically a privilege. Therefore, underprivileged sections, they will be denied certain rights. This comes out of some institution. It is very unfortunate. Though I was little amused by Mr. Jaitley's emphasis on the change of personnel in the EC. You see, institutions and their orders or their decisions have to be seen in the context. I understand his agitation or irritation over some other decisions of the election order. But on this, I think the better method would be to go by the merit of each and every decision and not try to dwell too much on the question of personnel. Then the other issue that I would like to also point out very humbly, that I agree with Bharadwaj. There was a difference of opinion. Congress wanted to go a little further, and we, as I have stated already, that I feel even this cannot stop the kind of criminalization or the influence of cash that we have made that position clear. But the point is that reference to so-called 8B in the so-called draft, which was removed on the basis of a consensus, should not have been referred on the floor of this house. Because I think more than myself, Jaitley ji himself has pointed out that it had no basis, because we are seeing how security agencies, not only a question of framing cases, they are also staging encounters and having people killed. And many of the questions, I mean, there are a lot of suspicion about that. So that could easily become a handle. We are also seeing that depending on which side you are on, a politician, the efforts of the agencies go on. Today, we have in the morning, the report of JPC submitted, and evidence is also there. One particular stockbroker, since he he financed a particular website which brought out certain investigation report which indicted the government. I mean, the way they were being hounded by the security agencies. I mean, this kind of standards prevail today in the country. Therefore, we also cannot give any arbitrary powers to the government and to the authorities, to the agencies who are there. Therefore, having said that the right to lawmaking is a supreme right, Madam, I am closing, supreme right which should be retained by the Parliament, and I think we have no problem with this bill as such, but these are some of the points, because I mean we believe that the struggle for cleansing our polity from the influence of cash and money power and the process of criminalization requires a much larger effort, and on those questions the alacrity and the proactivity of the government in terms of legislative action is very much wanting. Thank you.
Now, is Shri Rebola Chandrasekhar Reddy is going to speak now? You ready?
Thank you, Madam. I rise to support the bill. For sustaining a healthy democracy, we need people who are occupying the positions with the dedication, commitment, and service-oriented, Madam. While supporting the bill, I would like to highlight a few points which were discussed earlier and debated outside this house also. These electoral reforms and this process has got a long history, Madam. A proposal for electoral reforms was first sent by the Chief Election Commissioner in 1972, but could not be taken up for consideration due to dissolution of 5th Lok Sabha. Then the Election Commission had sent some more proposals again in 1979, but they also had to meet the same fate due to dissolution of the Lok Sabha. Then again revised proposals submitted to the government in 1982, 86 and 1989, which all gathered dust, Madam. But only in 1992 a few proposals from the Chief Election Commissioner were accepted, and now these proposals which are before us are important ones and are in the right direction. Through this amendment, I am sure if not totally, at least the major areas of politics are going to be cleansed. I congratulate the government which against all the odds has brought this piece of legislation before the House for its consideration. Madam, by bringing this amendment, they are trying to insert 3 sections, Madam. For 33A, criminal record, these details are being sought. We support this, Madam. Since the voter has got every right to know about the candidates who are in the fray and about the probable representative of that area, people should have information, knowledge about his background, everything, Madam. It is a must. And as far as 33B is concerned, Madam, candidates have to furnish all the information under the Act, and they are adding, inserting another new chapter, 8A, Madam, Declaration of Assets, both movable and immovable, Madam, of his assets and his spouse and dependent children. Apart from this, about liabilities also, whether he has raised any loans and due to any government institutions or banks, that should be disclosed. And this is a post-election disclosure, Madam. And insertion of section 125A, penalty for filing false affidavit, 6 months fine or with both, Madam. Here I would like to mention one thing, Madam. One should have caution with all these things, Madam. Otherwise, they are trying to, there are people who may try to mislead the authorities also. There may be certain things, Madam, like bona fide mistakes, technicalities, and declarations with good faith, and not a willful omission. All these things are to be taken into consideration while considering the affidavit on a complaint when it is cross-examined or put to test. These precautions must be taken, Madam. Otherwise, people are put to irreparable damage, Madam. And the other aspects, Madam, as far as criminalization and the declaration of assets, our party, Telugu Desam Party, Madam, we are proud to say that during 97-98 only, Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly has accepted the report of Ethics Committee, and it is mandatory on the part of every legislator to furnish all the assets and liabilities to the Speaker. It is mandatory in the Andhra Pradesh Legislative Assembly, madam. And our party is committed for cleaning the politics, more particularly avoiding the criminals into the party. At the time of enrollment of membership itself, we are screening, and we are trying to disagree with those people who are involved in criminal activities, and we are keeping them away from the party, madam. And my point is that every political party should have some introspection. Instead of relying on the laws and these amendments, other things, every political party should have some caution, should have some introspection in selecting the candidates whom they are projecting as their party candidates. People should have a better representative. For that reason, the political parties must take utmost care and caution in selecting the candidates, madam. And coming to this Rajya Sabha elections as suggested by the minister, we are for it, madam. If it is an open election, we welcome it. I am proud to say that from my party, we are about 13 members in this Rajya Sabha. We don't spend even 1 rupee for coming to this Rajya Sabha, madam. No money is required in our state, more particularly in my party. We are very proud to say that we don't spend even 1 rupee for the election, madam. And even my predecessors who represented my party in the Rajya Sabha, we don't need to spend any money, madam. And our party is committed to this. We are grateful to my leader Chandrababu Naidu in this regard also, madam. While supporting the bill, these precautions should be taken, and at the time of this prosecution or cross-checking the affidavit, madam, bona fide mistakes or technicalities should be taken care, madam. With these words, I support the bill. Thank you.
Shankar Kaushik ji.
मैडम, ये जो छोटा सा विधेयक माननीय उच्चतम न्यायालय तथा चुनाव आयोग के निर्देशों के परिप्रेक्ष्य और उन परिस्थितियों के वश लाया गया है, और ये सही है मैडम कि इस विधेयक के संबंध में सभी राजनीतिक दलों के नेताओं की बैठक हुई थी, और जो इस विधेयक में है उस पर आम सहमति भी थी। ये बात सही है कि इस विधेयक में वो सारी बातें नहीं हैं जो भ्रष्टाचार उन्मूलन के लिए कम से कम राजनीतिक क्षेत्र में बाहुबलियों के लिए या और किस्म के अपराध करने वालों के लिए काफी हो, उनको ना आने देने के लिए। और ये भी बात सही है कि कानून में और चाहें जितनी चीजों को बढ़ा लीजिए, लेकिन हम जो चीजों को बढ़ाना चाहते हैं, जिन बातों को बढ़ाना चाहते हैं, जिन और बातों को इसमें शामिल करना चाहते हैं, वो अपने अंतःकरण में भी झांक कर देखें। क्योंकि जो हम कानून बनाने वाले हैं और जो कानून की और वकालत कर रहे हैं और चीजें उसमें शामिल करने के लिए कर रहे हैं, अगर हमारे ही नेता लोग और हम ही लोग इस बात का निर्णय ले लें कि हम आपराधिक प्रवृत्ति के लोगों को चुनाव में हिस्सा नहीं लेने देंगे, तो बहुत बड़ी समस्या हल हो जाएगी। लेकिन वो हम नहीं कर रहे, आपको भी करनी पड़ेगी, और आप जाते हैं इसमें। चाहे आप जो है गिनती गिन लीजिए, लिस्ट लेकर बैठ जाइए, किसी को भी बैठा दीजिए, ऐसा मत कहिए गौतम जी, लिस्ट ले लीजिए। तो मैं तो अपने को भी दोषी बता रहा हूं, सबको दोषी बता रहा हूं, इसमें कोई संदेह नहीं है।
मैं इसमें
नहीं है, आप ना हो, ये अपने मन से सोचते हो, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं कोई बात तो आती है। तो मैडम, लेकिन जिस पर सहमति है इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि इस मामले में हम लोग कदम कदम बढ़े हैं, पीछे नहीं हट रहे हैं, कदम कदम बढ़ रहे हैं। लेकिन और भी चीजें इसमें शामिल करनी पड़ेंगी, निश्चित रूप से करनी पड़ेंगी। आज हमारे देश में जो सबसे बड़ा खतरा पैदा हो रहा है उन लोगों से पैदा हो रहा है जो धार्मिक उन्माद के आधार पर, सांप्रदायिकता के आधार पर चुनाव की प्रक्रिया में हिस्सा लेते हैं। ये कौन है? ये क्या अपराधी नहीं होंगे जो देश को तोड़ने के लिए बात करते हों, जो हमारे संविधान की मूल धारा है उसके खिलाफ बातें करते हों? उनको आप क्या कहेंगे? हमारी संविधान की धाराओं के विपरीत, हमारी संविधान की जो मूल धारा है उसके विपरीत, जो हमने कसम खाई है उसके विपरीत जो आचरण करते हैं, उनको क्या अपराधी नहीं कहेंगे? तमाम आयोग की सिफारिशें और उनके जो निर्णय थे, चाहे वो मानवाधिकार आयोग हो, चाहे वो महिला आयोग हो, चाहे और जो स्वयंसेवी संस्थाएं हैं उनकी तरफ से हो, सबको बताकर हम ये कह सकते हैं कि जनता ने तो मोहर लगा दी, महामंडित हम उनको करते हैं। ये क्या है? ये अपराध नहीं है। और अपराधी जो जीत के आते हैं वो भी इस बात को कहते हैं कि हमें तो जनता ने चुन लिया है, जनता की मोहर हमारे ऊपर लग गई है। ये सारी बातें अपने में हैं और इनको आपको सोचना पड़ेगा। क्योंकि अगर राजनीति को स्वच्छ बनाना है तो निश्चित रूप से हमें अपने संविधान की और संविधान की जो धाराएं हैं उनकी और जो संविधान की मूल भावना है उसका आदर करना पड़ेगा। और जो देश को तोड़ने के लिए इस ढंग के उन्मादों को फैलाते हैं उनके खिलाफ भी कोई कार्रवाई करनी पड़ेगी, उनको भी, उन पर भी कोई पाबंदी लगानी पड़ेगी। लेकिन उसमें भी सबसे ज्यादा जिम्मेदार मैं मानता हूं कि केवल कानून ही उसमें नहीं होगा, सभी राजनीतिक दलों को इस बात पर विचार करना होगा। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैडम मैं इस विधेयक का समर्थन करता हूं।
श्री अश्वनी कुमार, 10 मिनट बोलिएगा बस।
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chairperson. I will try my very best to conclude within 10 minutes assigned to me. May I at the threshold state, ma'am, that I rise with certain amendments to the bill which I have introduced on the premise that the bill in its present form does not measure up to the spirit of the Supreme Court judgment, of which this bill is a sequel. Madam Deputy Chairperson, it has been my belief, the belief of my party and of my leader, Shrimati Sonia Gandhi, that the judgment of the Supreme Court articulates the felt sensitivities of the people at large on a very vital issue that impinges on the health of our democracy. In that sense, we are debating today not only the rudimentaries of a legislative piece, we are in fact debating today the core of our democracy. When the Supreme Court adverted to a transparent electoral process, to reaffirming the contours of our political morality, since declined steeply, we were only affirming the commitment which the founding fathers of the Constitution gave to the people of India. In that sense, Mr. Minister, this is not an adversarial debate. It is a debate in which we all join to celebrate democracy, of course bringing to bear our individual perspectives to the issues and the focuses that we feel must be asserted. I would like very much to respond to what my dear friend Mr. Arun Jaitley stated. In fact, the gravamen of his presentation was that the bill must be supported because it affirms parliamentary supremacy. It repels an attempt at judicial encroachment on the legislative domain. And for that reason, we should support the bill as an act of the sovereign. the people of India. Madam Deputy Chairperson, I couldn't disagree more. The Supreme Court judgment does nothing of that sort. In fact, the Supreme Court judgment in terms states Article 324, which has been interpreted by Mr. Arun Jaitley as giving a license to the Election Commission to encroach on the parliamentary domain, according to the Supreme Court judgment, can do nothing of that sort and does nothing of that sort, because the Supreme Court in turn says expressly, Article 324 operates in areas left unoccupied by legislation. Therefore, there is no question of a conflict between the legislative and the judicial function. The court further said, the Commission shall not act in violation of law made by Parliament where one exists. It further says that holding of any asset or educational qualification is not the enlargement of the eligibility criteria to contest an election. Mr. Minister, this is a pointed clue to what the judgment says. All that the judgment does is to trace the right of a voter to know from Article 19(1)(a), a right that this August House has celebrated yesterday by passing the Right to Information Bill. This is the ultimate tribute to India's democracy. That little man who goes with a little pencil to vindicate democracy at the polling booth ought to know who he is voting for. Therefore, I ask myself the question, is the Supreme Court so wrong when it says these 4 necessary pieces of information that must necessarily influence the choice of an intelligent voter as to his choice for the candidate? Is it so grievously wrong that we have to bring a legislation to negate the premises of the judgment? I can understand certain safeguards, and I think the Minister is right, and I think Mr. Arun Jaitley is absolutely right, that there can be no question of giving the right to reject a nomination paper to the returning officer. But Mr. Jaitley is wrong when he interprets the judgment to give that right. The judgment says nothing of that kind. Supreme Court only stated, please give to the voter the necessary or the requisite information that would compel an informed choice to vindicate democracy, which is a basic structure of the Constitution. Nowhere, there is not a whisper, not a line, not a word in the Supreme Court judgment that says by an inference the Election Commission shall have a right of rejection. If only you had said that, if you don't mind.
I'll just correct that. Communicating a wrong information. Mr. Jaitley never said that. He said the Election Commission wanted that right. So the two of them together, it meant that way.
The premises of the submission of the Treasury benches proceeds on the basis that the judgment as interpreted by Election Commission has given a wide handle to the returning officer to reject the nomination paper. I can understand that apprehension. That's a valid apprehension. But that cannot be a justification, in my respectful submission, to question the premises and the essentials and the fundamentals of the judgment. The judgment reflects the moral vision, a coherent moral vision of a society in transition. It represents a vision of India's democracy, of how that democracy should be and not how it has come to be. That is why, Mr. Minister, we are at pains to move those amendments so that you could bring the bill and the legislation in line with the spirit, the substance, and the letter of the judgment. And let there not be a red herring there. Please, for heaven's sake, let there not be a red herring. There is no question of any conflict between the legislative and the judicial domains. There is no question of trenching. After all, as an eminent lawyer, you would know that celebrated judgment of Justice Black. In fact, in the US, when the whole doctrine of judicial review was being was being challenged as being non-democratic, as being a negation of the parliamentary principle, parliamentary supremacy, he said it is not we sitting as judges who do a thing or invalidate a statute. We do it by the command of the Constitution, and the command of the Constitution is the people's command, and the people's command is against the command of this august House. Therefore, when the Constitution itself confers the power to determine the contours of the separation functions and separation of powers, you can't fault the Supreme Court from doing its constitutional function. And it is the Supreme Court that has reiterated time and again that we are not infallible. All that the Supreme Court says is we are final but not infallible. Final because the Constitution makes us final. Therefore, Mr. Minister, I would, with all humility at my command, completely disagree with what has been stated on behalf of the Treasury benches. There is no trenching here. There is no conflict between the legislative and the judicial functions. If you want this nation to know that the political establishment in this country has not balked when it came to electoral reforms, that it has not become a judge in its own cause, that it has not found an escape route to dilute the spirit of the judgment of the Supreme Court, please, I beg of you to accept our amendments, because posterity will then not be able to fault us for not rising up to the occasion. This is a grave matter, Mr. Minister. It is no ordinary bill. It goes to the heart of the sacredness and the sanctity of our parliamentary democracy. And I beseech you with all humility at my command and with all the conviction at my command, let us not balk. Let it not be said that the present pronounced itself against the future. The democracy of this country, which you and I and this whole House celebrates together, is something in trust in our hands for the future. We have to take difficult decisions. And I agree that there could be certain misapplications of certain provisions. But that can easily be addressed by bringing in suitable, remedial, protective legislative devices. One more minute. I would therefore, in conclusion, only submit that there are three fundamental things that we need to disclose. And disclose in advance of the elections, not after the elections. This whole argument that the misuse of authority is correlated to the office that you occupy is not the central basis of the judgment. The central basis of the judgment is for the benefit of the voter who ought to know who he must elect. Therefore, the information must be disclosed prior to the election for the electorate at large, for the people at large, for the citizen at large, so that that little man, to quote the words of Winston Churchill, walking into the booth with a little pencil on a piece of paper, puts his choice and therefore vindicates democracy. With these words, Mr. Deputy Chairperson, sir, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I would like to press our amendments.
The Supreme Court intervened to recognize the right of an elector on the right to information regarding the qualification, character and assets of a candidate. The Election Commission of India issued an order. We all met, all the parties met, and the ordinance was issued. Now the bill has been introduced. Accordingly, I support the bill. There is no difference of opinion. But why the Supreme Court of India was constrained to intervene in such matters? We are responsible. The political parties are responsible. Once an election is announced, we search for candidates irrespective of their criminal background. We go and vie for alliances with political parties irrespective of their leaders or important persons in the parties with criminal records. People were really nauseated by this
approach of the political unholy alliances of political parties just for the purpose of garnering few seats or seats of power. Therefore, the Supreme Court, people approached the Supreme Court. There was a lot of writings in the newspapers, in other magazines, criticizing. This is the criminalization of politics, which was hated by the people of India, the Supreme Court, Election Commission, and everyone. Sir, when we are responsible for bringing in this, we should definitely welcome this because of our own conduct. We faulted, and here we should act to rectify this, and at least by this we should ensure that there won't be any future criminalization of politics.